What if heaven chose the most unassuming children to carry the most vital message of an age? Nestled in the serene hills of Portugal, surrounded by the scent of moist earth and the gentle sounds of sheep, three simple children were entrusted with a mission, a task that no wise man, no king, no powerful figure could have undertaken with such pure hearts and unwavering bravery. The story of Francisco and Jacinta Marto and their cousin Lucia dos Santos. It's not just a tale of apparitions, it's the story of how God, once again, selected the meek and the vulnerable to challenge and inspire the mighty. Chapter 1. The Shepherd Children of Aljustrel. Two ordinary children raised among rolling hills and grazing sheep, destined by heaven to change the course of the world. In the heart of Portugal, nestled among the gentle rolling hills covered in holm oaks and olive groves, lay a small village known as Aljustrel, a part of the parish of Fatima. It was a place where time seemed to slow down, where the church bells marked the rhythm of daily life, and where families lived off the land and their flocks, with a simple faith as deeply rooted as the pine trees that blanketed the Cova da Iria region. There, in modest homes of white stone and low roofs, lived the three children whom heaven would choose to shake the entire world. Francisco Marto was born on June 11, 1908, the son of Manuel Pedro Marto and Olympia of Jesus. He was a child of serene and contemplative nature, with dark eyes and a peaceful gaze, preferring the quiet of the fields to the boisterous games of other children his age. He loved observing nature with an almost mystical attention, the flight of birds, the movement of clouds, the color of the sky at sunset. Those who knew him said that Francisco possessed something special, an inner peace, uncommon in a child so young. As if his soul already sensed that he was destined for great things, his younger sister, Jacinta Marto, born on March 11, 1910, was seemingly his opposite, vivacious, expressive, quick to laughter, and with a burning heart. She danced with joy, sang folk songs, and filled any space she occupied with life. However, beneath that youthful energy lay an extraordinary spiritual sensitivity and a capacity for love that, when tested, would prove capable of enduring sufferings that would have overwhelmed many adults. Jacinta deeply loved Francisco and her cousin, and the three formed a bond of friendship as strong as could only exist between souls who share the same fields, the same dreams, and the same faith. Lucia de Jesus dos Santos, cousin to Francisco and Jacinta, was born on March 22, 1907, and was the eldest of the three, daughter of Antonio dos Santos and Maria Rosa. Lucia was an intelligent, decisive girl, with a spiritual maturity that surprised those who knew her. From a young age, she displayed a deep inclination towards prayer and inner reflection, and she naturally assumed the role of guide among the three cousins. It was Lucia who taught Francisco and Jacinta the prayers of the Rosary, who led them to participate in the devout traditions of the village, and who, later, would be the primary voice charged with transmitting the messages of heaven to the world. The three children spent their days tending their family's flocks of sheep in the open fields surrounding Aljustrel. It was a humble and repetitive life, made up of cold mornings, simple lunches outdoors, and long afternoons under the Portuguese sun. But far from being a sad life, it was a life infused with the presence of God. They prayed the Rosary together, invented games, told each other stories, and gazed at the sky with that sense of wonder that only children and saints possess. No one in Aljustrel imagined that these three unknown shepherd children were about to become protagonists in one of the greatest wonders in the history of the Church. Chapter 2. The Angel of Peace before Our Lady. An angel visited the young seers 3 times to prepare them through prayer and penance. The story of Fatima doesn't begin in May 1917. It begins earlier, much earlier, in the spring and autumn of 1916, when 3 children tending their sheep in the fields of Aljustrel began to experience something that none of them knew how to explain. Before sending Our Lady, heaven had the grace to send a messenger to prepare the way, like a farmer plowing the field before planting the seed. That messenger was an angel, and his presence forever transformed the spiritual lives of Francisco, Jacinta, and Lucia. The first apparition of the angel took place in the spring of 1916 near the Loca do Cabeço, a rocky hollow in the fields where the children often took shelter from the wind. A gentle breeze and an intense light preceded the arrival of a young figure, human in appearance but of supernatural beauty, whiter than snow and as transparent as crystal bathed in sunlight. The angel told them, "Do not be afraid. I am the angel of peace. Pray with me." And he prostrated himself on the ground, touching the earth with his forehead, inviting the children to do the same. Lucia would always remember that posture of absolute adoration as the most perfect she had ever seen. In his second visit, the angel appeared in the summer of the same year, this time at the well in the garden of Lucia's parents. His message was one of exhortation and fraternal correction. He reminded them that they should pray with greater fervor, that prayer and sacrifice would attract God's mercy upon the world, and that they should offer everything to the Most High in an act of reparation for the sins that offended him. Above all, accept and bear with submission the suffering that the Lord will send you, he told them, preparing them unknowingly for the trials that were to come. The children emerged from that encounter with transformed souls and a burning desire for prayer that they had not known before. The third and most solemn apparition occurred in the autumn of 1916, again at the Loca do Cabeço. This time the angel held in his hands a chalice and a host from which drops of blood fell. He left the chalice suspended in the air, prostrated himself beside the children, and prayed 3 times a prayer of Eucharistic adoration and reparation. Then he gave Holy Communion to Lucia and the contents of the chalice to Francisco and Jacinta, saying to them, "Take and drink the body and blood of Jesus Christ, horribly outraged by ungrateful men. Make reparation for their crimes and console your God." It was the first and only time that Francisco and Jacinta received communion from the hands of an angel. The effect of these 3 angelic visits on the 3 children was profound and immediate. Francisco, who couldn't hear the angel's words, only see him and feel his presence, was nonetheless imbued with a new spiritual gravity, a desire to adore and console Jesus that would mark the rest of his short life. Jacinta began to understand the value of sacrifice with an intuition that far surpassed her age, and Lucia, the eldest, understood that these visits were a preparation, a threshold before which they stood, and that what was to come would be even greater. The angel of peace had fulfilled his mission. The 3 shepherd children of Aljustrel were ready to receive Our Lady. Chapter 3. Our Lady more radiant than the sun. On May 13th, 1917, a supernatural light and a lady dressed in white forever transformed the lives of the 3 shepherd children. It was May 13th, 1917, a Sunday with a blue sky and a generous sun over Cova da Iria. The 3 cousins had taken their sheep to graze in that field belonging to Lucia's family, and after the midday rosary, they were playing peacefully among the stones and grass, when suddenly they saw 2 bright flashes that they mistook for lightning. Startled, they began to gather the flock to seek shelter, but as they approached a small holm oak tree growing in the field, they were stopped by something none of them expected. On the branches of that bush, surrounded by a light so intense it set the air around it ablaze, was Our Lady, dressed in white. She was a young woman, of a beauty that didn't belong to this world, dressed in a white cloak adorned with gold and with a rosary of pearls that shimmered in her hands. She didn't inspire fear, but a profound peace and a joy that the three children didn't know how to describe. Lucia, overcoming her astonishment, was the first to speak. "Where are you from?" "Our Lady." The answer came in a soft but firm voice. "I am from heaven." And at the anxious question of whether they would go to heaven, Our Lady looked with tenderness and promised that they would, although Francisco would have many rosaries to pray first. The scene had the naturalness of a conversation between a mother and her children, and at the same time, the solemnity of an encounter that transcends all that is human. Our Lady asked them to return to Cova de Iria on the 13th of each month for 6 months, and to pray the rosary every day to achieve peace in the world and the end of the war. It was the time of World War I, and those words had a terrible weight for many Portuguese families who were awaiting news of their sons on the battlefronts. The request for the rosary wasn't a decorative devotion, it was an urgent call to prayer as a spiritual weapon in times of tragedy. The children understood it with the clarity that only grace gives, and promised to return. Francisco, throughout the entire apparition, saw Our Lady but didn't hear her words. Jacinta saw her and heard her, but didn't speak. It was Lucia who dialogued, who asked, who received the words and kept them as treasures in her heart. This distribution of graces, far from creating differences between them, united them even more. They were 3 pieces of the same mosaic, 3 strings of the same instrument that heaven played with a master hand. When Our Lady rose toward the east and disappeared, the 3 looked at each other in silence, knowing that something had changed forever, that the world they had known until that moment would never be the same. That first apparition marked the beginning of a path of grace, but also of suffering. Lucia, when she got home and told her mother what had happened, received not the joy she expected, but disbelief and scolding. Her mother, a woman of solid faith but strong character, feared that her daughter would be a victim of illusions, or worse, of the deception of the devil. At the Marto's house, the reception was somewhat more favorable, because Manuel Marto, Francisco and Jacinta's father, was a man of serene faith and an open mind, but the path towards the recognition of the apparitions would be long and painful, and the 3 children would have to learn to bear the disbelief of others as part of their own offering to heaven. Chapter 4. The Secrets of Heaven. Our Lady entrusted the children with 3 secrets that would shake the history of the Church and the entire world. Throughout the 6 apparitions that took place between May and October of 1917, Our Lady revealed to the 3 seers messages of a depth and urgency that exceeded the understanding of any child. But it was in the apparition of July 13, 1917, when Our Lady entrusted to the 3 shepherd children what history has called the 3 Secrets of Fatima, a set of visions and messages that for decades enveloped the world in a mixture of fervor, speculation, and reverent fear. The children, upon receiving those revelations, were overcome in a way that none of them would ever forget. The first secret was a vision of hell. Our Lady opened her hands, and from them sprang a light that seemed to penetrate the earth, revealing to the children a sea of fire in which souls were submerged, screaming in pain and desperation. The vision lasted only an instant, but it was enough to transform the inner life of the 3 seers forever. Jacinta, in particular, was indelibly marked. From that day on, the thought of the souls who were condemned became the most powerful motive for her desire for penitence and sacrifice. "The souls in hell," she would often ask with her eyes full of tears. It was her way of saying that the horror of that vision would never be erased from her memory. The second secret was a message for the Church and the world. Our Lady asked for devotion to her Immaculate Heart and promised that if men listened to her call, there would be peace. But if they didn't listen, a war worse than the first would come, announced by a night illuminated by an unknown light. This prophetic announcement was astonishingly fulfilled in January 1938, when an extraordinary aurora borealis illuminated the skies of Europe with red lights that many mistook for a fire. Weeks later, Hitler invaded Austria, and the world entered the spiral that would lead to World War II. Lucia, who was already living in a convent at the time, recognized in that phenomenon the sign announced by Our Lady. The third secret, the most famous and debated, was put in writing by Sister Lucia out of obedience to her superiors and remained sealed for decades in the Vatican archives. When the Holy Father John Paul II made it public in the year 2000, the world discovered a vision in which a bishop dressed in white climbed a steep hill among corpses and reached the top, where a large cross stood made of rough timbers. There, he was shot down by bullets and arrows, surrounded by soldiers. John Paul II, who had survived the assassination attempt on May 13, 1981, the very date of Fatima, saw in that vision the mystery of his own suffering and the maternal hand of Our Lady, who diverted the bullet. A maternal hand guided the bullet, he said with conviction, and went to Fatima to deposit the bullet in the crown of the Virgin's image. The secrets of Fatima weren't instruments of terror, but urgent calls to conversion. Our Lady didn't reveal them to frighten, but to awaken, to shake dormant consciences, and to call humanity back to God's path before the consequences of their alienation became irreversible. Francisco, Jacinta, and Lucia bore the weight of those secrets in their hearts, with a maturity that astonished everyone who met them. They weren't fanatical or disturbed children. They were souls touched by grace, capable of seeing beyond the visible horizon, and willing to pay the price that privilege demanded. Chapter 5, The Persecution and the Steadfastness of Faith, Imprisoned, Threatened, and Pressured. Francisco, Jacinta, and Lucia refused to deny what their eyes had seen. News of the apparitions quickly spread throughout the area surrounding Fatima and reached the ears of the civil authorities of the region. Portugal at that time was living under a regime with anti-clerical leanings, which viewed with deep distrust anything that could strengthen the faith of the people. The administrator of the municipality of Vila Nova de Urem, Artur de Oliveira Santos, popularly known as O Tinhoeiro, was a man of Masonic convictions and an authoritarian temperament, who decided to put an end to what he considered a dangerous farce against public order. His strategy was simple and brutal: to kidnap the children and interrogate them until breaking their testimony. On August 13, 1917, the day designated for the fifth apparition in Cova da Iria, Artur Santos summoned the children's parents under the pretense of examining the case, and once he had Francisco, Jacinta, and Lucia in his power, he took them to Vila Nova de Urem and locked them in the local jail, alongside common prisoners. The intention was clear: to isolate them, scare them, and get them to deny their statements. The administrator interrogated them separately, promising them freedom in exchange for retracting their stories, and threatening them with being thrown into a cauldron of boiling oil if they refused. The threat was atrocious for any child, and yet the three received it with a serenity that left their jailers baffled. Jacinta, who was the youngest, was the first to be subjected to this test. The administrator called her aside, threatened her with death, and demanded that she reveal the secret that Our Lady had entrusted to them. She responded, with dry eyes and a firm voice, that she would rather die than reveal what Our Lady had asked them to keep. Francisco, for his part, endured the same interrogations with the same usual calm, as if he were already beyond the reach of fear. And Lucia, who, being the eldest, felt the weight of responsibility for the three, encouraged them in the cell and helped them to pray the rosary while they waited for a fate they didn't know. In that dark dungeon, The shepherd children of Aljustrel became little martyrs of the confession of faith. After 3 days of confinement, the administrator, unable to break the will of those children, released them without having obtained anything. But the damage had already been done. The apparition of August 13th could not be celebrated on its customary date, and the thousands of pilgrims who had arrived at Cova da Iria found only the empty field and the small holm oak tree of the apparitions. However, heaven didn't allow itself to be defeated by human cruelty. Our Lady appeared to the 3 visionaries on August 19th in a place called Valinhos, as if to confirm that her presence didn't depend on human permits. This extraordinary apparition was like a divine response to the arbitrariness of the persecutors. The steadfastness of the 3 children in the face of persecution was one of the most eloquent proofs of the authenticity of their experiences. No child of 7, 8, or 10 years old invented a story and maintained it under threat of death with such serenity. No adult who knew them could rationally explain the peace that accompanied them. Even in the darkest moments, those who had begun to doubt found in this episode a powerful reason to reconsider their skepticism, and those who already believed saw their faith confirmed in a way that no theological argument could have surpassed. Blood, or in this case the willingness to shed it, has always been the most convincing testimony of truth. Chapter 6. The Miracle of the Sun. Before 70,000 witnesses, the sun danced in the sky of Fatima, fulfilling the promise of Our Lady and silencing the unbelievers. From the first apparitions, Our Lady had promised that in October she would perform a miracle so that everyone would believe. The news spread throughout Portugal and beyond its borders. And on October 13th, 1917, tens of thousands of people set out for Cova da Iria. They came from all corners of the country. Devout believers, indifferent onlookers, skeptical journalists, and government officials who expected to see how the supposed miracle would fail and discredit the children and those who supported them once and for all. The field that only a few months before only knew the silence of the shepherds was that day covered by a multitude that later estimates placed at around 70,000 people. The morning of October 13th dawned with intense rain. A leaden sky poured a cold and persistent rain over Cova da Iria, soaking to the bone those who had slept outdoors to secure a good spot. Mud covered the ground, umbrellas were useless, and discouragement began to take hold of many of those present. But to the voices of the most impatient responded those who prayed the rosary without rest, sustained by a hope that didn't depend on good weather. Among the crowd, the 3 shepherd children waited in silence with their families, serene as if they knew exactly what was about to happen. At noon, when the clock struck the appointed hour, the clouds suddenly parted, and the sun appeared in the sky as a silver disk that rotated on itself, throwing rays of colors that dyed the landscape, the clothes, and the faces of those present with red, yellow, green, and blue reflections. The crowd, in an instant, went from skepticism to amazement, and from there to panic. The sun began to dance in the sky, and then seemed to detach from its place and rush towards the earth in a spiraling fall, which made tens of thousands of people fall to their knees in the mud, screaming in terror and contrition. There were those who believed the end of the world had arrived, and they began confessing their sins aloud. The miracle lasted approximately 10 minutes, and at the end, the sun returned to its place in the sky as if nothing had happened. But what did happen, and had absolutely no explanation, was that the soaked clothing of those present was suddenly dry. The mud that covered the ground had disappeared, and those who had arrived sick or in pain reported feeling healed. The event was documented by journalists from the most important newspapers in Lisbon, some of them openly opposed to the church, who described it with amazement in their reports the following day. The newspaper O Século with a secular leaning, titled its report with words that no one would have expected from its pages, "How the Sun Danced in Fatima." While the crowd experienced that outward miracle, the three visionaries contemplated something in the Cova area that only they could see, the last apparition of Our Lady, who on that day appeared accompanied by St. Joseph and the child Jesus, and also by our Lord Jesus Christ blessing the crowd, and by Our Lady of Sorrows. Our Lady identified herself that day as Our Lady of the Rosary, and repeated for the last time her request: "Pray the Rosary, do penance, that men may offend God no more, for he is already greatly offended." Those words, spoken before the sky that had just witnessed the greatest public miracle of modern times, were the spiritual testament of the Fatima apparitions. Chapter 7. The Departure to Heaven and Lucia's Long Road. Francisco and Jacinta died like flowers cut in spring. Lucia lived for decades more, carrying the message of Fatima to the world, and that is why her cause for canonization followed a different path. Our Lady had announced to the three shepherd children of Aljustrel that Francisco and Jacinta would soon be taken to heaven. That news, which to the world sounded like a tragedy, was received by the two siblings as a promise of joy. If Our Lady said so, it would be so, and they only had to prepare themselves with love and patience. But the preparation was not easy. The same Spanish flu epidemic that between 1918 and 1920 killed millions of people around the world also reached the humble homes of Aljustrel, and Francisco and Jacinta fell ill with a severity that made those around them understand that this illness would be their last. Francisco was the first to depart. During the months that his illness lasted, that boy who had always preferred silence and contemplation devoted himself to an interior life of astonishing intensity. His greatest desire was to receive his first communion before dying, and when he finally achieved it, in April 1919, those present said that his face lit up with a peace that did not belong to this world. On April 4th, 1919, Holy Thursday, a day charged with symbolism that could not be coincidental, Francisco Marto closed his eyes for the last time with a smile on his lips. He was 10 years old. His mother found him in the morning with his hands clasped, and the gesture of someone who has concluded a long prayer and has finally found rest. Jacinta survived her brother for a few months more, but those were months of physical suffering that would have been cruel for any adult. She was transferred to Lisbon to undergo an operation that the doctors hoped could save her, and in that unknown city, far from her home and her family, she endured surgical procedures without complete anesthesia, with a serenity that astonished the doctors and nurses who attended her. In the hospital, she continued to offer her pains for sinners and for the Holy Father, as Our Lady had asked her. On February 20th, 1920, in the solitude of a hospital room in Lisbon, Jacinta Marto gave her soul to God. She was 9 years old. A 9-year-old girl who had carried the weight of the world with a tenderness that can only come from heaven. Lucia, however, was not called to heaven in childhood. Her path would be long, solitary, and demanding in a different way. If Francisco and Jacinta had to die, Lucia had to live and remember, to live and write, to live and obey superiors, bishops and popes who asked her to put in writing what she knew, to answer questions, to bear the weight of being the only surviving witness of the most extraordinary events of the century. In 1921, she was sent to study with the Sisters of St. Dorothy, far from Fatima, to protect her from public attention. In 1948, she entered the Carmel of St. Teresa in Coimbra, where she lived as a contemplative religious under the name of Sister Lucia of Jesus and of the Immaculate Heart until her death on February 13th, 2005, at the age of 97. Precisely because Lucia lived so long, and because her life was shrouded in particular circumstances, her entry into religious life the need for the Church to carefully examine her writings and her testimony, and the canonical time that must pass after death before officially opening a cause. Her canonization process followed a different path than that of her cousins, Francisco and Jacinta, who died in childhood and whose lives were relatively simpler to examine, were beatified by John Paul II in Fatima on May 13, 2000, during the celebrations of the third centenary, and canonized by Pope Francis in the same sacred land on May 13, 2017, on the centenary of the apparitions. The cause of Sister Lucia was opened by the Bishop of Coimbra in 2008, 3 years after her death, and continues its course with the seriousness and patience that the Church has always applied to these matters. God's times are not men's times, and Lucia, who learned that better than anyone, certainly understands it from eternity. Chapter 8. Prayer to Saints Francisco and Jacinta Marto. Saints Francisco and Jacinta, little shepherd children of Aljustrel, you, who in the humility of your childhood knew how to receive with a clean heart the visit of the angel and of the Most Holy Virgin, and who without hesitation bore the cross of suffering as an offering of love to God and of compassion for sinners. Intercede for us before the throne of divine mercy, you who saw the fire of hell and chose the path of penance, who endured disbelief, mockery, and persecution without abandoning the truth that you had received, who in sickness and pain continued to pray the rosary and offer your sufferings with joy. Teach us to have the same firmness in faith, the same generosity in sacrifice, the same filial confidence in the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Saints Francisco and Jacinta, you who interceded for sinners even from your beds of pain, obtain for us now the grace of true conversion, the love of praying the most holy rosary, and the burning desire to please God in all things. May your example remind us that holiness is not a privilege reserved for the great, but a gift that God offers to everyone who, like you, opens their heart wide to Him. Pray also for the Church, for the Holy Father, for all those who are far from God, and for the souls in purgatory. May the message that Our Lady entrusted to your lips and hearts resound in today's world with the same urgency and the same tenderness with which you heard it on that blessed hillside of Portugal. Amen.